Live every evening, 7 to 8 p.m. Hotseat station with Nile Gold, a crystal malt lager beyond an ordinary malt.
Welcome back to this edition of the 933 KFM Hotseat. We're discussing education much more broadly, but narrowly on the school feeding program with Bishop Zach Niringi, Assistant Bishop of Kampala Diocese. The show is brought to you by Nile Gold. The coffee we drink is supplied by KFM. Bishop, let's return to this question of, Angela was raising the question, it is the responsibility of the parents. Is it accidental that the message that's gone out there is government is providing everything, so you don't have to bother? Because you brought in two things. You brought in the question of payment of graduated tax and no responsibility to pay school fees, and therefore no contribution to the child's education.
No question, it's not accidental. Certain proclamations, policies, the ways in which our politicians have spoken have given the sense to the parents everything is free. It's not uncommon when you go to the villages and the villagers will tell you, our president told us it's okay, give birth to as many, I will educate them. So however, the responsibility to ensure that our citizens take citizens' responsibility is also, and especially think about the school system, because if you think about the other stakeholders in the educational process, the foundation bodies, the last time I checked, between Church of Uganda and the Roman Catholic Church, they own about 70% of the primary school system.
Is that true?
That is very true. It's very extremely high percentage.
How much of the private sector, outside of the institutionalized the churches like yours, the church like the Roman Catholic Church and the Anglican Church, how much is in private hands? Purely commercial private.
What do you mean? No, what I'm saying is what I'm talking about, close to 70%, is actually schools whose foundation bodies are either Church of Uganda, Roman Catholic Church, and are in the UPE system.
Okay.
The actual private schools in the primary sector, it's a much smaller percentage. The percentages are much higher for secondary school. I think you have about purely private, maybe close to 26%, which again is another frightening thing, because private means they are in it for business. And the last time again I checked, study any educational system, particularly at primary or secondary level, actually it doesn't make necessarily good business sense. But let's not get there. The point I was making, it is the responsibility of the foundation bodies as well to be able, because these parents who send their children to these schools, they attend the churches, the mosques, whatever religious foundation there is. So really it is also a sign that foundation bodies, the churches, the mosques, have not fulfilled their responsibilities in encouraging, in motivating parents to do what they must do, feed their children. Now, of course, some of them say to us, but wait a moment. When we have sought to motivate parents and say to them, it is your responsibility to pay, to feed your children, they get back, and the RDC, the government authorities, have a different message. So that is why, we are arguing. We are saying, in order to really make this work, first of all, look at the Education Act. Review it in a way that will make it possible and indeed necessary for parents to actually pay for lunch. Secondly, make it possible and necessary that those who are either orphaned or vulnerable for one reason or the other, that's what decent governments do, are provided for, are able to be identified. This appeal is not just to government to do the appropriate change in the education policy. We are also saying government certainly needs to look at funding of education. Today as we speak, the proportion of the budget for education is 14%. What does that mean? It has implications in terms of teachers' pay. It has implications in terms of classroom space. check classroom space right now. It's a dismal in terms of proportion of pupils to class, teachers pay. So we need to talk about the total educational experience. It's not just the fact that children don't have lunch. That is why we have poor completion rates. There are other factors.
Bishop Zach, if education is slicing off 14% of the national budget, agriculture has been demanding a minimum of 13%. Health has been demanding possibly 20%. Are there enough resources within the government to allocate to give everything that you're asking for? Because once you have fed the children, you need to provide them with pit latrines. There is a primary school in Mbale that has 3,800 kids. They have a one-stance pit latrine, and all of them have to keep waiting in a line, in a queue, to be able to use that pit latrine. You have to talk about classrooms, where they're available. You have to talk about the teachers, whether actually the teachers are feeding or not. In one of the new school districts in Luka, we found an interesting story. Parents had decided to provide food for their children. Older girls in primary 7 and primary 6 would prepare the food, but the teachers would appropriate it until there was a storm that a meeting had to be held to separate the food for the teachers and the food for the kids, because the parents were contributing for their kids. Are some of the suggestions or the demands you're making on government realistic?
Definitely. The issue of resources, government must make certain choices about priorities. The priorities must be informed by the nature of the population, development strategies. Now, Uganda is a child nation. About 60% of Uganda's population is 18 years and below. That says to you, in prioritization of budget, surely this 60% needs to get a serious chunk of that budget. So today, for us to see 14%, let me tell you what that means. In fact, the minister's statement a month ago at the budget conference for education, she did say that there was not going to be any increment. On the contrary, there had to be a further reduction by over 300 billion shillings, which meant that there is not going to be any rehabilitation of classrooms, reconstruction of classrooms. For example, if a storm blew, the roof is off, no replacement, no construction of fresh pit latrines, no increase in
emergency provisions, Bishop.
Sorry?
There are emergency provisions. If a storm blew off a roof of a school,
surprise. The answer is no. It doesn't exist. Let me finish this because it's about budget allocations. So of course the question really has to do with prioritization. Let me come back to you. Only more recently we've been discussing in the public arena compensations being done, whether it's to Basajja Balaba, whether it is the vehicles for members of parliament, I'm not saying these things shouldn't be done. That's not the discussion right now. But government makes the decision, it's a priority, let's find money for it. The president, the government decided it was a priority to find money for jets. So the issue really, what we must interrogate, are prioritization. Agriculture today, I think, receives about 4%.
Let's take a little bit of that, because agriculture, and I have seen from the Afrobarometer, when you ask Ugandans what they want from their government, health and education are high up. When it comes to policies addressing those two areas, you find significant problems. And I've never understood why, if Bishop, you say that the constituency for this education and health, especially health of young people, is so huge. How come government policy is under the capture of other sectors? That presents a very complicated problem, because even responding to your earlier analysis of the education problem being one of underlying food insecurity, you can see how the two are tied. I think that you're looking at the net outcomes, the law and other things, but at the core of it is that government priorities are under the capture of some other issues, and the political class somehow manages, to ignore or just provide rhetoric to the issues that really matter. How do you connect that large constituency, including, by the way, health workers and teachers who are in that business, and farmers, and make sure that policy responds to it? That is the challenge.
I totally agree with you. I was in a meeting with Ministry of Finance officials. I asked them to explain how they come to the prioritization, the kinds of ways they determine what goes where. I asked one of them, and honestly, to this day, I have not received an answer. We are hoping we can meet the Minister of Finance to help us understand
servants. They work.
I know. We want to meet the politicians. We want to meet them and say, no, but for goodness sake, let me tell you this. Actually, it is going to be impossible to ignore this. Why? It's a time bomb. The youth unemployment we see today is part of that. You have 83% youth unemployment rates today in this country. It is a time bomb. Why do you see so many young people loitering on the trading centers anywhere in this country? It's to do with what we are reaping from our educational system. It's to do with what we are reaping from lack of investment in agriculture. That is true. I can say this to you. It's going to be impossible to ignore this. Actually, it's going to be able to be in each of our living rooms. Crime is growing. All these are symptoms of failure to keep priority where it ought to be.
What is the strategy? That is still the unanswered question. Health is important. Education is important. It has got large constituencies. Every family has a child in school, several children. How is it that politics doesn't address these issues and instead addresses something else? In fact, let me just add that the clergy, who are not bystanders, because like you said, they have a direct investment in education. Majority of those schools are have been under their care. How is it that all these years you have evolved to this point where we have a time bomb in our hands and our policy doesn't respond as creatively as it should?
The question you ask is part of what this is about. We need to hold government accountable to deliver for the people, for the priorities of the people. That's it. And I think everyone now in our country, you see, we have a very subservient population, who this whole patronage thing works in a way in which those politicians come and kind of pacify the people. We're doing this for you. You need us. No, it's about accountability. So yes, the time is now. Action must be now. Foundation bodies, Church of Uganda, Roman Catholic Church, the Muslim community, all those that own schools need to stand up and say, yes, parents must do what parents must do.
What has the church been doing, ministering all these years and not getting the message out that parents, they owe a responsibility, but the church is involved together with the state in managing the country? How is it that we reach a point where...
Well, I can certainly tell you this. When I was chairman of the Board of Education, I can tell you this, for 4 years, we advocated, we sought, we talked about the need for parents indeed to pay in our school system to ensure that they actually pay for lunch. When we attempted to do this, we received resistance from RDCs. Dare it, and the head teachers said, no, we can't implement it, we are going to lose our jobs. So what did we do? We actually sought for a meeting with the Prime Minister, with the Minister of Education,